Sure.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining the Viper and the Deaf podcast. My name is Kalah Haley, and I am very excited to introduce to you CEO of Pactimo and just amazing person all around, Frank Kim, Uncle Frank, as we like to call him. So thank you so much, Uncle Frank, for coming onto the show today.
Well, it's great to be here with you, Kalah. I'm so proud of you, so proud of what you're doing with your company, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we were just talking about, you were sharing a little bit about, we were just talking about, we're both in Denver, Colorado. And so the weather, it's just been like really nice and it's not normal. So, so you're able to go on bike rides and, enjoy the outdoors while we still have some nice sunshine out there.
Yeah, many bad and difficult things about COVID, but not having to commute and having a little bit of freedom in your daily schedule has been a blessing. So
yeah,
I'm in the cycling industry, so riding my bike, I feel like I'm actually working a little bit.
Exactly. There you go. I was going to say, so a lot of people may or may not know about Pactimo. Obviously, the folks here in Denver are pretty familiar with it. But do you mind sharing a little bit about Pactimo? And we want to get into other things as well, but since we're here, do you mind sharing a little bit about Pactimo?
Absolutely. Pactimo is a provider of technical performance apparel, primarily for cyclists and for triathletes. We've been around since 2003 when Jim has founded the company. So I started kind of talking about Pactimo with Jim in the early days, and then eventually I joined at the end of 2005 as the CEO, and have been with Pactimo for 15 years.
Wow.
So we sell all over the world. We are a direct-to-consumer brand, what you would call digitally native. In other words, our business is primarily centered online, direct-to-consumer, although we do have sales reps who are in the field. Our customers are anywhere from Olympians to world champions to professional athletes, all the way down to just the passionate cyclist who loves to ride, and it's a big core part of their lives. I'm very proud of the kind of product that we put out. We talk about the fact that we're based in Colorado, and as you were saying, you can never tell what kind of weather you're going to have here. And we have mountains, we have elevation, we have heat in the summer, we've got cold in the winter, we've got all sorts of conditions. And so it gives us a great laboratory to be able to test and develop our apparel. And we say that it meets every climate, every elevation, every adventure that our customer can come up with. So we're very proud of what's happened so far.
I don't know if you know this, fun fact, but Pactimo was one of my first ever jobs when I was, like 13.
I think I remember seeing you around the office, Kalah. What were you doing at that point?
I was helping, so Grace, she was like with design, right?
Yep.
And then I also helped Mr. Chris Jacobs. I was doing a lot of, there was a big book. I just remember there's a huge book, and I was going through all of the cities and states and finding the retailers, I think, to like resell the products through, I think. And then another thing I did was helping Lisa Roski, like ship out, SKUs to people when they were going to try them on or something like that. So
Right. Well, there you go. You've seen every end of the business, from product development to finance to customer service. Why aren't you working for us today, Kalah?
I mean, oh my goodness.
Now that you reminded me, we might have to come up with some sort of offer for you.
Oh, snap. Okay, there we go. So that was not the reason why I invited you onto this podcast, by the way.
Well, it's interesting. I'm sure we'll get into some things later, but you may have started a long tradition we have at Pactimo with teenagers that we've hired from time to time for different temporary jobs, whether it's in the warehouse or around the office, just to give them a taste of work, put a little money in their pocket, but also put them in a positive environment,
Totally.
So we do that even now. And so it's a fun part of the job.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad to have been a trailblazer over at Pactimo.
You're a trailblazer in many ways, Kalah.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I've always, it always gets me excited whenever I see, since being in Colorado, either like someone has like a sticker on their water bottle and they're like wearing the Pactimo jersey or kit, and I'm just like, I know that company. So it keeps me, it's very your guys' company has done a lot of great work. But okay, tell me a little bit more about like before Pactimo, you're pretty much all of your adult life was more so you were in the ministry, the full-time ministry that whole time, pretty much right out of college. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And I know you went to Harvard, which is like cool. But when did you become a disciple while at Harvard?
So I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, went to the bright lights of the city in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think my freshman year, I just got carried away with all the stuff that was going on. But I came from sort of an interesting spiritual background.
Okay.
We were Koreans living in a small town in Minnesota. So there was really no minorities except for me and my family pretty much. But my parents would commute quite a distance to go to downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul to attend a Korean church on the weekends.
Okay.
And so that became a very central part of our sort of social life, was being in that church community. I would have to say that most of it was probably cultural, but there was some sort of effect on me in terms of my thinking about God, my thinking about the Bible, that somewhere it was important. But when I went to Boston, I cut loose that first year. I just totally jettisoned all my connections with spirituality and faith and things like that. But somewhere around the end of my freshman year, I began to feel a lot of emptiness. And I'd done well at school, but I felt really bad about kind of where I was going in life. And I think a lot of probably young adults go through that as they sort of discover what's important to them.
Right.
And at that point, I wanted to start going back to church and tried to figure out where to go. And someone knocked on the dorm room door of one of my friends. We had just gotten finished playing basketball, and I was in his dorm. I wasn't even in my own room.
Wow.
And invited the bunch of us to come to Bible study. And everybody said no. But I had just decided to start figuring out my relationship with God. So I said yes. And everybody was shocked that I said yes, because that wasn't my reputation.
Sure.
But that was the beginning. And it was a Bible talk. And I had never looked at the Bible that way before. I had a lot of knowledge about stories and parables and things like that, but never applied it to my personal life like we were doing in that Bible study. It took me a while, but eventually became a Christian in my sophomore year. And I loved it. I loved everything about my faith. I loved everything about being a Christian. I was just amazed in my relationship with God. And I loved the relationships that I had in the church. But I told myself, and I actually told some of the brothers, I think, that I just love God. I want to serve him, but I will never become a minister.
God's like, I dare you to say it.
The word you never say with God is never.
Yeah, exactly.
So somewhere in my senior year, near the end of the first semester, I had been really working a lot with the teens in the church as a volunteer, had seen a lot of things that I'd never seen growing up. Worked in a lot of low-income neighborhoods, worked with kids who had gone through tough times, worked with families that had gone through really hard times. And my eyes are just open to see the power of the gospel beyond men's wisdom,
right.
and beyond what people can do, come up with in terms of social reform and things like that. Although that's all important, the power of the gospel to change a heart and eventually to change a family, and then to change children's lives and things like that blew me away. So I wrestled it out, and instead of going into finance or law, decided to go into the ministry.
What were you studying?
I was studying economics and European history.
Okay. So so historically or traditionally in the U.S., immigrant families tend to have a very, focus when it comes to education. I mean, you're at Harvard of all schools. And so like, what were your parents, when you decided to go into the ministry, I guess, what were your parents' reaction to that?
Well, that's a pretty insightful question. Honestly, it's kind of interesting when I got in,
Mm,
and probably a lot of it was just luck and God wanting me to be involved, get invited to church or something.
mm,
But when I got in, it made my parents so incredibly proud.
mm-hmm.
It was kind of a culmination of all their hard work and their experience in coming to America and things like
Yeah.
that. And they had been very successful on their own.
Mm.
When I decided to go into the ministry, it like crushed their dreams.
Oh,
It
wow.
was it was so difficult, and that made it very difficult for me because I wanted to please them. I wanted them to be proud of me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was grateful, for the opportunities that they had given me in my life. But I felt this was a higher calling that I could not deny,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was kind of difficult. It was difficult in our relationship for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like over time, just by being a Christian, by being committed to relationship and things like that, that over time that wound eventually was healed. But
Mm-hmm.
it took a little while and it took some effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, as a young man, when I think I was maybe 20 or 21 when I made that decision,
Okay.
I wasn't always the most sensitive or wise either in how
Sure.
I communicated things. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that I should have said things better or done things better, but certainly it was not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, good. I mean, and so you decide to go into the full-time ministry. Where did you go?
Well, interestingly, I well, first of all, I met, dated, fell in love, and
Yes.
married the most incredible woman in the world, Erica, who
Is
you
that
know.
why you were in the teens? No, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we met. Well, we had met at church, but she volunteered just like I had
Mm,
to help teenagers, and counsel and study the Bible with them and things like that. And
yep.
so we used to work together a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I just thought, man, this is an amazing person. So, anyways, got married, and we had kind of thought, well, we're both Asian and American, and a good place maybe for us to go would be a place like Los Angeles or something. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think we were planning to go to the LA church and help
Okay.
out there. But then the church leaders in Boston said, hey, we need someone to lead our Paris mission team because plans hadn't worked out
Okay.
for the original couple. And they sat down with us and said, hey, Erica speaks French. Well, she's fluent. She does so many things well. But anyways, she had studied French since she was 5, and
Wow.
so she was fluent. And they said, so we think since Erica's fluent, maybe you should go to Paris. And I said, well, that's great that Erica speaks French, but I don't speak French at all. And they said,
Yeah.
well, you can learn,
Yeah.
So anyway, so we went to France, and
Wow.
we were there for a while, about a year in total. We went there twice. We went there to learn the language, came back, and then went again with our team.
Mm,
So it's about a year and a half. But our daughter Miyoko was born there,
okay.
and it was an amazing adventure, an incredible time, an incredible.
Mm,
I learned so much about people, about cross culturalism. The French are very different from the Americans,
mm-hmm.
different way of thinking, different value system. It's a post-Christian
Right.
society, so maybe a little bit America is kind of tending in that direction right now as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good time to really grow as a Christian.
And then, I mean, so here you are in your early 20s, just finished school, just newly married, now a young dad, and you're in a country where you're figuring out the language. I guess, something that I'm kind of interested to talk about is, if anything, our fellowship, our family of churches, we have a really rich history of like your story isn't totally unique in that there are a lot of people who are young who went into the full-time ministry and um, you know essentially gave a lot up from a career standpoint um, to serve in that way.
Mhm.
Um, that was I don't want to date you. I was going to say that was I don't know what the year was, but now it being 2020, I guess I kind of am wondering like, do you think that we're still in that same place, or do you think that we've changed, or, if we're different, how are we different? And maybe even why do you think we're different?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a good question. That's a deep question.
It's loaded.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah, probably demands a very complex answer, which I'm not prepared to give.
Sure.
But
Sure.
I would say, um, there's a passage in the Bible where it talks about men who understood the times and the places.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a concept biblically called kairos, which is God's timing. There's
Mm-hmm.
chronos, which is chronological time, but there's kairos, which is the right time.
Right.
And at the time, the fellowship that you and I belong to
Mm-hmm.
was very young,
Mm-hmm.
and was in a stage of wanting to be able to spread the gospel around the world, um, and communicate that to many, many places where churches did not exist that were aligned with the way that we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a huge need for men and women to go to different countries
Yep.
and cities and to start congregations and to sort of build the foundation of faith in those particular locations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a need, and who better to go than people who had the freedom to go.
Mm-hmm.
Had didn't necessarily have the trappings or the responsibilities of family and the jobs and the careers that had already been set. Although there are many heroic people who even gave those things up, or not gave up kids, but in those life stages,
Right.
went as well. But I think it was good for us as young people to be able to take responsibility that was our role, that was our part that we could play
Mm-hmm.
in communicating the gospel around the world.
Yeah.
When I fast forward to where we're at now, I look at it as a former missionary,
Mm-hmm.
that many, many churches exist around the world, and they're actually being led by locals,
Mm-hmm.
people who are, fluent in not only their language, but in their culture and their society. And
Right.
they're able to communicate the gospel much more effectively in a way that impacts people, that they're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that same necessary need exists for, if we're talking about Americans,
Mm-hmm.
for young Americans to aspire to going overseas. I think that there are areas where young Americans still are needed.
Mm-hmm.
If you have particular talents or abilities, or if there's countries where the gospel is still not being preached, or churches that need encouragement and strengthening, I think there's still very, very good opportunities for young American women and men to rise up and go do those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that um, we're kind of now in a position where we've got to expand our impact in society.
Yep.
And so we need young professionals like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the peers that you have, who are not only successful in what they're doing in their career, but it comes from a desire to please God and to glorify Him in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a firm believer that in Romans 12:1-2, that in view of God's mercy, we offer our bodies as living sacrifices, which is our spiritual worship.
Mm-hmm.
That body that we sacrifice is not just the body that goes to church on Sunday,
Right.
but the body that goes to work every day, Monday through Friday. And that our work glorifies God in the eyes of the world, and that
Mm-hmm.
we're able to touch and to impact people that maybe I couldn't have when I was a full-time minister, because those were people who are either going to look at me in a different way, or I just never was going to meet, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So I think that times have changed.
Yep.
I still think there's a huge need for young men and women to devote their lives full time to the ministry. But there's also a huge role and a huge need for people like you and myself to be able to project God into the world through the roles that God has given us in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's so interesting. This year has, uh, from my viewpoint, accelerated a lot of things.
Mm,
Um, it's always been on my heart to see our churches and our church really take advantage of mediums like this, and reach the largest population, which is online, essentially.
mhm,
And it's been interesting to see how in a year like this, it's kind of opened those doors. Not kind of, it totally opened those doors.
Right. Freedom
And
open.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think that what we're doing here at St. Rock and Truce, I was really grateful to be in a position to serve our churches in this way and help with media and the virtual conferences that we've been doing and things like that. And it's always been on my heart that this has always been ministry. Like all of the things that we're doing, it's
Mm-hmm.
always been built with that end goal in mind. And so it's kind of cool because I've always had a heart, and I think you know this, but I've always had a heart for full-time ministry. But it's been really cool to see how God has used my passions and goals and skill sets and talents and all those things, and kind of has created like this alternative full-time ministry kind of
Mm-hmm.
job that I have. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so funny. I looked up one day this year because this year I've just everything has just been on a full sprint. And I looked up one day and I was like, oh wow, God, like I'm totally doing like full-time ministry, but in like a different way. So I was like, all right, you've answered that prayer.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very
Yep.
cool.
Yep. Good for you. Good for you. I'm so proud of what you're doing.
Thank you. It's been an interesting, one of the things I want to transition a little bit here is as a young entrepreneur and business person, business leader, I've learned so many things, and I've probably learned some lessons the hard way. But I've also had some really good like mentors and some guidance along the way as well. I guess like what would you say? Because I think that a lot of younger, not just young, but a lot of disciples are even figuring out business and trying to figure out how to build a business. And you've been leading the ship over at Pactimo for, like you said, for the past 15 years. I guess I'm kind of selfishly, I'd love to learn just like what are some of the key insights or learnings or lessons that you've learned along the way, running Pactimo.
Well, again, I'm sure that there's books written about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
But if I was going to say one thing that is really close to my heart, it's the idea of building team.
Mm.
So I feel like this is a universal principle, and it's one that's important even in the mission field and church leadership, but it's absolutely powerful and essential when it comes to business leadership. If you go into a mission field, you want to make sure that you have great dynamic, you have a great atmosphere, you have good interaction, and it doesn't really matter who the individuals are in terms of skill and ability, but they've got to be able to interact well, or else it's just not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing with any ministry. It's the people on the team
Mm-hmm.
that really make it successful or not, along with God's power. I would say when it comes to business, that lesson is absolutely the same. I, over everything, I always say, and my partner, Chris Jacobs, we're the co-owners of the company at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We always give God all the glory for any success that we have.
Yep.
And God has really blessed us. I mean, we've had a lot of great growth, inked 5,000 3 times, Colorado company to watch, all this kind of stuff. But in the midst of it all, we always look at each other and say, who are we? We don't know what we're doing. In the end, it's God's grace that blesses it.
Yes.
But team, I think, is incredibly important. And so my job, I think, as a business leader is to, number one, make sure that we select the right people to be in the team, on the team.
Yep.
And you want skill, you want ability, you want talent. Those things are absolutely important. But then you also want to make sure that you're selecting for character.
Yep.
People who are team players, people who are, they're strong, they're confident, secure, but they're also humble. And they can let someone else have the limelight as needed. They can support each other. And then as a leader, I look at myself, I always envision myself as sort of a conductor of a symphony. And you've got these people who can do incredible things with their particular instrument that you can't do.
Right.
But the one role that you have is to make sure that we're all on the same page of music and that we're aligned.
Yeah.
and that the volume is correct, that the solo gets to shine when he's supposed to shine or she's supposed to shine,
Mm-hmm.
and that you stay on the same beat, and that eventually you fulfill the vision that you have together as a group. And that's my job. As
Mm-hmm.
a I can't outsource that to anybody else. And
Right.
I think sometimes when we start a company or start small, we are an instrumental player. We're one of the people who's playing the instrument.
Right.
And that's great. And that's essential. And that's how you start. But to transition to the point where you're able to make other people shine and get the kind of people on your team that elevate the group, make sure that they're the kind of people that want the group to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have done a good job of making sure that everybody is aligned and knows where you're going and what you want to do, and that you accomplish it as a team. And there's just so many ways that you can build that in
Yeah.
to your uh, business. What do you reward for? What do you measure?
Mm-hmm.
All those things have got to be tied back to these essential things about building a strong team.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Any success that we've had at Pactimo has primarily been because of other people, not because of me. But
Mm-hmm.
my job, but I did have a role in it because I put them on the team and I helped the team to function together well. And that's what I have to do the most.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, we're in this. We've had a lot of growth this year, and both at St. Rock and at Truce. And my biggest thing is uh, I love strategy and I love marketing. Those are like the two core things that if I could spend all my time doing those two things, I would just be so happy all the time. But because we're in this, that awkward growth kind of stage, where we're, still trying to get like full-time employees and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself playing more of this like operations role, where it is a lot of building the right team. It is a lot of, putting the right systems in place and making sure everyone knows like, okay, this is, in this process, this is where your job starts and ends, and this is when you hand it off to the next person, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been it's been a lot. And I'm so excited to get to the point where I can like quote unquote fire myself and kind of hand that off, because I'm like, that is one skill set that like I'm willing to do, but it's definitely not like the most, the thing that I want to do all the time. So I
Well,
think I understand.
Kayla, though, given the fact that you've been doing this now for about a year and that you already are self-aware, you understand that importance of that, that you're focused on it as a priority, I think means that you have what it takes. And quite honestly, it's a role that never really ends. I'm sorry to say that.
Right.
As long as you're going to be leading the company and leading the team,
Yep.
that's it. There's no replacement for continually not just maintaining it but growing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's leadership. But I also think that it's one of the things that's hard for Christian business leaders to keep in mind. I think
Okay.
a lot of times as Christians, what we want to do is rely so much on just, hey, we love each other.
Mm-hmm.
We have a good relationship. And because we're both Christians, we're going to trust each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so we neglect the sort of fundamentals of process, of policy,
Mm-hmm.
of, structure and organization. These are things that I think it doesn't matter what, even if we're both members of the same church or we're both Christians, have the same faith,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't have those things, eventually we can bump into each other.
Totally.
And you need that in order to make sure that you can work together well as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting you bring that up, because so the theme of this podcast, or like the whole, theme of the entire podcast is viper and dove. So it's being as shrewd as vipers and as innocent as doves. And I'm always like trying to figure that out, because especially like, I think, it's, you always want to have the goal and the desire, and the goal is to be able to hire you want to be able to hire folks from church and things like that. I guess like you kind of hit on it a bit, but if you can dig a little deeper into that, some areas that you feel like, man, Kalah, you really need to make sure that this is something that you are aware of. Because I think that you hit it right on the head, is that there are the assumptions that, you know, there's so much room for misinterpretation. Like there's
Mm,
so much
that's
room
right.
for just like mismanaged expectations. And then there, because they're just all these like really good assumptions, and like assumptions of like operating in good faith, which, you know, there usually always is. But that like managing expectations part, I feel like is always a key thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because I do speak quite a bit with other Christian business owners or business leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And we share this common dilemma that you're explaining right now, that you're describing right now. And I guess two things that kind of help me. One is it just helps me in business, period, is the fact that because of my faith,
Mm-hmm.
my all of my self-esteem and my security and my confidence is not wrapped up in my company.
Right.
But I know that many people who don't have our faith,
Mm-hmm.
this is their life.
Yep.
This is all they got. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're going to ride and fall on every failure. They're going to rise on every win. They're going to become arrogant because that reflects how great they are
Mm-hmm.
versus, and
Sure.
when things go bad, they're going to really get down and discouraged because that's going to erode their security, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for you and for me and for other Christian business leaders, it's important to realize that in the end, business is a part of our lives, but God is our life.
Yes.
And that helps me to look at okay, I'm going to be really honest. I look at Pactimo as like a huge game.
Okay.
It's an incredible game. It's a
Yep.
fun game. It's an awesome game. And I've got my team, and
Yep.
other people have their team.
Yep.
And there's a score that we keep, and that might be sales or revenue or growth or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's a great game. And I know you were an athlete when you were in high school. You're one of the best basketball players in your high school, right?
Yep. Yep.
So there's a joy in that competition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's fun for me. But at the end of the day, it's not everything.
Right.
Okay. And so because of that, I can think about my team as well. And I think about the Christians that are on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, not if I had a soccer team, not everybody's a soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not a soccer player, it doesn't mean they're not a good person. It doesn't mean that they don't have a good heart.
Right.
It just means they're not a soccer player,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And so they're probably an awesome baseball player or an
Right.
amazing tennis player, or maybe they're a great cyclist or something like that, but they're not a great soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact that I can look at my company a little bit like that
Mm-hmm.
allows me to look at people, even if they're a brother or sister in Christ, and say, man, you're an awesome person. You're an amazing human being. You're a great Christian. But you're not really good at this particular game that we're playing here.
Right. Right.
So let me help you find a better game for
Yep.
you.
Now,
And does that make sense?
yeah, well, so now I'm curious, because is that like, okay, you're playing different games and that's like different departments within the company, or is that like, no, the whole company is a soccer game? And
I think it's both. It's
mm-hmm.
both. There are people that one of the big things at Pactimo, we have a external mission towards the consumer, to provide an outstanding customer experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Consistently. And then, of course, we have the internal experience, which is we want to help everybody to discover and to experience personal and individual growth within our company.
Okay.
Well, there are people that we brought on, and we brought on for one role.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time goes on, we realize that's not really your core competency.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's see if there's a place for you in the company. First of all, do you like working here? Is this the environment that you want to be in? Do you enjoy being a part of this team?
Right.
If the answer is yes, then let's see if there's a place for you here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes if the answer is, well, I like it, but there's no place for me here. There's just not that role, because that's one of the challenges of smaller companies.
Right.
We don't have 1,000 different roles to offer people.
Right.
We've got 30 places in the office here in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got like 150 worldwide. Well, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit.
Right.
So then our job is to help someone to transition to a better fit for them outside of Pactimo.
Mm-hmm.
And so Chris and I have talked about this quite a bit over the years, and we're happy when someone joins the company, discovers skills and abilities, or discovers what they actually want to do, and we can be the launching pad for them in the next stage of their career, even if it's not at Pactimo.
Right.
Of course, we're more happy if we can figure it out for them to stay on the team.
Right.
And we've got great longevity right now. But either way, our job is to help people to grow in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how we try to express our faith.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've had to figure out as well, there is a difference between ministry and business,
mm-hmm.
is that in Christ, I believe anybody can change.
Mm-hmm.
I believe anybody can become loving.
Yep.
I can believe anybody can serve.
Right.
I believe anybody can change these certain things in their lives because of the power of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to business, I also have to admit that I have to acknowledge the fact that God made certain peoples with certain gifts and other people with other gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't hurt them by thinking, no, if I just stick with you long enough and work with you long enough and try
right.
hard enough,
yes,
even though you're a creative artist and that's what you want to do, I can make you into an accountant.
No.
That's believing too much. That's believing in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's miracle. That's miracle work. Yeah.
But I think Christians get caught into that.
Yes.
Like if I have enough faith, anybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily the case.
I got caught up. It's so interesting you mentioned that. So I hired, it made me feel like I shouldn't hire people I know anymore after this, but I hired a really good close family friend earlier this summer, and the person, was a young person and had just gotten out of school and, was looking to learn and a lot of things like that. And I guess on my end, I've had to learn how to do a better job of understanding like what I'm actually looking for. Because I didn't set that person up for success. And then I realized once they weren't doing what I needed them to do, I realized I was like, oh, wow, you did not communicate like what your expectations were.
Right.
And then it got to a situation where they're already on the team and I'm trying to invest and help them develop and grow quickly because there are like a ton of needs that need to be met by whoever's in this role. And because they're just not able to like really catch on pretty quickly, I'm like finding myself in this like really guilty spot of like, oh my gosh, I like totally brought you into this role, not being myself clear on what was needed or not articulating it up front. And then even by family, I'm like, I just don't know if this is a good fit. And I'd rather just kind of break it off now than like prolong this. And then there was a lot of like, you can't just, now the rest of the family's got like their whole opinion about it. And it's like, you can't just let the person go because you just brought them on. And I'm like, oh no. So yeah, I mean, I think that was one lesson I learned very quickly this year was being, no matter how, because it's been a hectic year, like there's just been so much going on and almost maybe feeling even to the point of like drowning and you're just like trying to grab onto things. And someone says like they're interested in helping you. You're just like, sure, come on and help me. But really fighting to have like that maturity of taking just a day to like really be clear on like what it is that I need to accomplish so that I'm not just flailing around like needing help and then hurting other folks in the process.
That's right. Yeah. I think sometimes we try to avoid the conflict or try to avoid the short-term pain and we end up creating more, right? So I think what you shared is really correct. It's, it gets back to what you were saying before about processes, policies, expectations, all of those things. Our job as leaders is to be very clear about that so that people know where they stand and know what the direction is. And,
totally.
And it takes time. It takes effort to do those things. And, job descriptions, making sure that those are clear and laid out and that they're under review on a consistent basis. Those things are really important. But yeah. I think, man, it sounds like you're learning a lot of great lessons and, figuring it out. But I will say in the beginning, it's kind of like anybody who can help, get them on board.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you get to a point where you start to think about your future. You know, you always want to think about scaling.
Yes.
You always want to think about growth. And you get to a point where you have the luxury. In the beginning, you want anybody who will believe in what you're trying to do. But at a certain, then you get to another stage where you have the luxury of evaluating each person who's joining your team to say, will they elevate the team?
Yes.
You know, what do they bring to elevate the team? And
Exactly.
a lot of times I think we get caught up in what can we do to elevate them to the rest of the team? And there are certain situations where that's a good thing to do. But by and large, the question we got to ask ourselves is, if I bring this person on, how do they raise and elevate the level of everybody
Yeah,
on the team?
totally. Well, maybe one last question, I guess, you know, what is in that spirit, I guess, what are you thinking about, especially in a year where you mentioned Pactimo is a direct-to-consumer online native business? How has COVID impacted Pactimo, and have there been any opportunities that you've seen this year that might not have been as clear previously?
Well, I think maybe rather than sort of creating any new opportunities, it's accelerated and multiplied the ones that we were already pursuing. You know, to be quite honest, the greater part of our business has always been customized clothing. So it's for events, for teams, for clubs, for racing teams, and all of that got canceled this year. But we had started several years ago with that a product line that was aimed at individuals. So it's more like Nike makes clothing for a sports team, but then you and I can go and buy Nike run gear at a store or something like that. And so we were building that part of our business, and it was growing quite well. But this year, it was like putting gasoline on a fire.
Wow.
Cycling in general just took off this year as a broad category. You can't find a bike to save your life. So many bike shops just sold out of all their inventory because everybody couldn't go to the gym anymore. So they're riding their bikes. And then of course the second wave is okay, now what about what clothing you're going to wear? And not all clothing companies were able to take advantage because a lot of them are tied to the brick and mortar channel. And that was a little bit tough for them. But for us, it was a banner year. It was incredible. And we didn't know. We started out thinking like everybody else, what's going to happen, you know, how we're going to keep everybody employed and how we're not going to lay anybody off. And then as the year wore on, it just became an amazing year for us. And so I think from April 1st till now, in our online direct-to-consumer business, we've experienced something like 50% growth. And so it's been a real great year for us. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. So I think what it is that we have traditionally had a really good emphasis on building consumer loyalty through programs that we have, rewards programs. We have a membership program. We have a lot of social media communication interaction with those people who are connected with our brand. And so what I'm excited about is the fact that we were able to bring in so many new people into the Pactimo tent. And because of all the sort of infrastructure and the emphasis that we have on working closely with our consumers, I think we're going to keep quite a large number of them.
That's wonderful.
So I'm excited about next year and the years to come and what's going to happen there.
That's exciting.
I think that because of this, we built a stronger base here in North America. We've also have a small growing market in the UK. But as in the future, in the near-term future, what we're looking to is to try to create a more global business. And so we're looking at new markets and re-emphasizing and reinvesting in the small foothold that we have in Europe and the UK as well. So truly trying to grow the brand over there. But I think the fact that
It's okay.
The fact that we're online direct gives us the leverage or the platform to do that. So that might have taken place 2 years from now. You know, or 3 years from now, but now it's going to take place next year because we have the growth to be able to sustain that.
That's wonderful. Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to see how it continues to grow and develop. And this is, I mean, I listen to so many different podcasts, but this is kind of it's accelerated consumer behavior, and in pushing, different markets in different directions, as well as I was mentioning earlier on with the church, and just how we communicate and connect to not just our members, but people who might not even be aware of our community. And so it's been really cool to see how we're really tapping into all these different areas. So well, thank you so much. We clearly have to have another chat here soon. I gotta call Auntie Erica and just see how she's doing. I saw you on Church Online a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, Uncle Frank's got the silver fox hair going on now. So I was like, wow, COVID was kind to you. I mean,
oh, is that right? Okay, well, it's becoming a grandparent. I'm in that new stage now with 5 grandkids. You gotta be that role.
Yes.
I tell you what, Kalah, being a grandparent, you have something to look forward to. You got to go through all the steps to get there, but once you get there, it's just an amazing time in your life.
Well, I just hope I get nice, like, silver locks like you do one day. So.
Well, Kalah, I look forward to speaking more with you about not just business stuff, but I do think that the space that you're in is essential for ministry, and for continuing in our mission to reach the world with the message of Christ. So
definitely.
Yeah, I'll contact you offline.
Okay.
We'll do some more talking about this.
Sounds good. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, Kalah. Love you.
All right. Love you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.